The harbor of Cape Town moved on schedule that winter night in 2011. Cargo cranes lifted containers, clerks ticked ledgers, dock workers drifted home with their pay stubs folded in their jackets. By 4 a.m., one man was missing. Sifo Dlamini, a quiet laborer on the night shift, failed to clock out. His locker remained shut, his time card frozen. The police report noted, "Absent without trace." For years, silence covered the gap. Families whispered, supervisors shrugged, and the harbor's rhythm swallowed the loss. Then, in a sealed file, 8 years later, an entry surfaced. A cash ledger, water-stained, tied to a smuggling route that ran through those same docks. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from today. And if you want more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe. The Cape Town docks in winter carried the sound of machinery like a drumbeat. The long container cranes rose against the night sky, their arms swinging with mechanical certainty. Floodlights along the harbor cut broad cones through the fog, turning steel surfaces into sheets of pale fire. Dock workers moved in and out of those beams, small figures in reflective vests, each one clocking in and out under the watch of timekeepers. The system was simple. Each worker swiped a gate card, a small plastic rectangle logged by the harbor's central server. Every entry left a mark. Every exit did the same. On the night of June 18, 2011, 34 dock workers entered through the gate between 7:45 p.m. and 8:10 p.m. Each swipe was printed in a neat list of times and names on a gray sheet that rolled from the server's printer at the end of shift. At 8:05 p.m., Sifo Dlamini's name appeared. Male, 33. Laborer. Hired casual contract for Container Bay 4. He had worked the same bay for 3 years. His attendance was clean, his wages modest. He was known among his crew as quiet, reluctant to drink, reluctant even to talk. He smoked alone, standing at the edge of the wharf. That night he carried nothing more than a metal lunch tin and a faded jacket. His locker, number 47, was half rusted and often stuck when closed. He had signed into Bay 4 as instructed, collected his gloves, and walked across the concrete apron toward the container stacks. A supervisor noted his presence on the stevedore log at 8:15 p.m. Then the record stopped. By the end of the shift, just before 4 a.m., 33 cards swiped out. The gate log showed one absence. Sifo's card had no exit. The system listed his name once, in, no out column, no swipe on record. In the handwritten roster book, the supervisor had marked him present at the start, then left the line blank at the end. When the rest of the men left the harbor, Sifo's locker was still locked. His jacket hung inside. His lunch tin remained unopened. The key to the locker was still in the bottom pocket of his overalls. One foreman called it a clerical error. Another wrote him off as a walkout. Dock management signed an internal note. Absent without trace. The family reported him missing by noon the following day. They were told men sometimes abandoned jobs, left debts, found other work. Police entered absconded into the missing person ledger. The file sat on a shelf. The first physical search of the docks turned up nothing. Pallets of citrus, cartons of frozen fish, crates of machinery, all moved without delay. The water near the wharf was checked by a harbor patrol boat. No clothing, no body. A missing person poster was printed with Sifo's face, taped to a fence by his cousin. The wind tore it loose within a day. The forensic record, however, began almost invisibly. The gate log sheet, torn from the printer, was signed into evidence by an administrative clerk. It noted 34 entries, 33 exits. Sifo's card was numbered in sequence, 1 and 17. Cards 1 and 18 and 1 and 19 belonged to men who worked beside him. They swiped out within minutes of each other at 3:55 a.m. No gap, no delay. Only Sifo's card line remained open. The chain of custody form, filled in black ink, showed the log sheet sealed into an envelope. Its evidence number was 0012-2011. Detective Johann Kruger was not yet attached to the case. For 2 weeks, the file remained dormant. Only when another officer noticed the blank exit field did the matter shift. Kruger, veteran of property crime investigations, was asked to clear the file. Nothing more. He signed for the evidence, logged the gate sheets out of storage, and laid them flat on his desk. His finger moved down the list, stopping at the absence. A single line break inside a page of routine. Kruger visited the dock 2 days later. He walked the same path Sifo had taken, through the gate, across the apron, into Bay 4. He marked distances, noted cameras mounted above the gate, logged the time each recording unit stored. One camera pointed directly at locker row 3, where Sifo's locker stood. But the supervisor told him the camera's recording had corrupted, the tape was recycled, the absence widened. Inside the supervisor's office, Kruger saw it. A leather-bound ledger, cracked spine, pages rimmed with black grease. It sat under a pile of shift rosters, its cover warped by damp. He lifted the corner of one page. Rows of numbers ran down in blue ink. Some lines showed sums far larger than a dock worker's wage. Kruger did not seize it. He noted it in his field log. Unlabeled ledger on desk, to be verified. He closed it, returned it to its place. The family called again. His cousin asked for news. Kruger had none. He stood on the edge of the wharf that night, recording the temperature, the wind, the visibility. He logged the light conditions at 4 a.m., noted the position of ships in the bay. He signed each note with date, time, and initials. The search ended without discovery. No footprints marked the apron. No blood was visible. Only the paperwork remained, a silent record pointing to a man who walked in but never walked out. One gate card never swiped out again. Detective Johann Kruger began his inquiry by retracing the smallest of details. He requested Sifo Dlamini's employment records from Harbor Administration, including wage slips, duty rosters, and locker inventory lists. The forms were handed over reluctantly, their carbon copies still smelling of damp paper. On the wage slips, Sifo's pay was recorded at 2,000 rand per fortnight, docked for late starts only twice in 3 years. But tucked into his locker, folded beneath the lunch tin, Kruger found 3 receipts, each for cash deposits amounting to over 5,000 rand. The dates matched nights when Sifo had taken additional shifts. The amounts were impossible for his salary. The discovery forced the detective to catalog each slip with chain of custody precision. Each receipt was logged under evidence numbers 0013 through 00 photographed, sealed, and initialed. The handwriting was careful, printed block letters, as if someone had intended no signature could be traced. Kruger considered the possibility of loans, gambling winnings, or offshore payments. But the dock workers he questioned dismissed those theories. They had seen Sifo with no new clothes, no new vehicle, no indulgence. He lived in the same room, walked the same route to work, bought the same cigarettes every evening. The supervisor's response was terse. He must have been running a side hustle. Kruger pressed further. The supervisor admitted Sifo had once taken over an unscheduled container unload near midnight, claiming it was overtime pay arranged by a shift manager. Yet the official overtime logbook showed no entry. That gap mattered. The detective copied the overtime register page, drew a red line under the blank column, and signed it into evidence. Kruger returned to locker 47. Alongside the receipts, he noticed another object jammed into the corner. A torn scrap of ledger paper, lines filled with faded pencil. Only 3 entries remained legible. Abbreviated words, a date, and numbers. Dock night on 18, 75,000 hand. The page smelled faintly of salt water and oil. It did not match Sifo's handwriting. He sealed it in a separate envelope, evidence number 001. He interviewed Sifo's co-workers in Container Bay 4. One recalled seeing him loiter near a sealed container after the crane set it down. Another remembered a faint argument between Sifo and a foreman about double pay. Their accounts conflicted, but both hinted at money outside the wage slips. Kruger wrote each statement on lined paper, dated and signed. The detective reviewed the roster log. It confirmed Sifo's presence. But at the column for exit, the supervisor had written nothing. When Kruger asked why, the man shrugged. Busy night. Maybe I forgot. But the blank lines appeared only once, next to Sypho's name. Every other worker had an exit time. Kruger clipped the roster page to his case file, noting the anomaly. By now, the leather ledger from the supervisor's desk gnawed at his thoughts. He had recorded its existence, but not its content. He returned to the office late at night, requesting access under a formal warrant. The ledger had been moved. The desk was bare. The supervisor insisted it had been an old payroll book, disposed of during cleanup. Kruger logged the statement. He wrote in his notebook, "Ledger missing, possibly destroyed." The trail of paperwork, however, already suggested a pattern. Unexplained cash, overtime with no record, a fragment of ledger marked with sums dwarfing a worker's wage. Each item was mundane. Together they whispered of a larger ledger still unseen. Kruger sealed his evidence bags, recorded his initials across the tape, and signed the log. Each object was tagged and stored. The weight of a vanished man now sat inside paper envelopes. A torn receipt carried the smell of salt and oil. Detective Kruger scheduled a full round of interviews with the men who had worked alongside Sypho in Container Bay 4. He set up in a bare room at the port security office. Fluorescent lights, one camera mounted high, a steel table marked by years of scratches. Each worker was logged in by badge number, their statements taken on lined paper and signed at the bottom. One stevedore recalled that Sypho had been reassigned mid-shift, asked to help with Container 40987. A sealed unit scheduled for inspection the next morning. He described Sypho standing by the container longer than usual, gloves tucked under his arm, as if waiting for instructions. Another said he remembered hearing raised voices, Sypho arguing with a supervisor about work that wasn't on the roster. Both accounts conflicted in detail, but their overlap pointed at Container 40987. Kruger retrieved the container's seal log. Each unit received a steel tag stamped with a unique code, recorded in the customs book. For 40987, the seal number entered did not match the tag recovered at inspection. Somewhere between unloading and inspection, the seal had been replaced. The customs officer had signed off without question. Kruger highlighted the mismatch, photocopied the page, and logged it as evidence 0017. CCTV coverage should have confirmed the shift. But when Kruger requested footage from the camera overlooking Bay 4, he was told the recording block between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. was corrupted. A systems engineer printed a report, frame loss due to power fluctuation. Kruger noted the absence with the same precision as physical evidence, stapling the report into his file. Absence itself became data. He walked the apron where Sypho had last been seen. Paint on the concrete was chipped by years of forklift tires. At the spot near the container rows, Kruger found a faint scrape along the ground, a mark wider than a boot. He photographed it, added a scale ruler, and logged it into evidence as potential drag trace. No blood, no fibers, only the suggestion of something moved across the surface. When he returned to the supervisor's office, Kruger again looked for the ledger. Its absence was too sharp, as if deliberately removed after his first visit. He questioned the supervisor under caution. The man denied knowledge. Yet in the corner of a filing cabinet, Kruger spotted another sheet folded behind rosters. This fragment carried faint graphite smudges, the tail end of a column of numbers. At the bottom was a set of initials, not Sypho's, and a note. Dock night. Kruger bagged it. The families pressed for answers. Sypho's cousin described calling his phone at 4:10 a.m. It rang twice, then went dead. Phone company records showed the device connected to a tower on the waterfront until 4:07 a.m., then no signal. Kruger placed a map pin on his caseboard, aligning it with the time Sypho should have exited. The point sat directly over Bay 4. The timeline narrowed. Entry at 8:05 p.m. Last roster note at 8:15 p.m. No CCTV after 11 p.m. Phone dead at 4:07 a.m. The container's seal switched in the same window. In the silence of the port, it became clear. Sypho had walked into a container yard where the paper trail bent and broke. A container departed with a seal that never matched. Detective Kruger pushed the inquiry beyond paperwork. He requested a controlled search of Bay 4 using forensic technicians brought in from the provincial lab. On the third night of examination, under floodlights that turned the wharf pale, they sprayed luminol across the concrete apron and pallets stacked near the water. Blue light bloomed along the wood grain of one pallet. The glow traced irregular patches, small sprays no larger than coins. Swabs were taken, labeled, and sealed. The technician noted possible human blood. DNA analysis confirmed the samples matched Sifo Dlamini's reference profile, supplied by his family through a toothbrush and comb. The technician's report, signed and dated, was logged under evidence number 0021. For the first time, the case shifted from missing to probable foul play. Kruger placed the typed page onto the board in his office, pinning it beneath the gate log sheets. The pallet itself told another story. Its manifest listed frozen citrus crates delivered to Warehouse 9, but the paperwork showed an irregularity. One crate number listed on the manifest did not exist in the warehouse ledger. A missing crate, a blood-stained pallet, and a dock worker unaccounted for. Kruger photographed the markings, logged the manifest, and drew a red line connecting all three on his board. Closer inspection of the pallet revealed more. A scrap of paper had adhered to the wood under the blood glow, fragile and half-pulped by seawater. When teased loose, it revealed lines of writing faint in pencil. They resembled a ledger's format, rows, numbers, abbreviations. Though half illegible, the remaining digits matched the pattern already found in Sifo's locker fragment. Kruger bagged the papers separately, evidence 0022. He questioned workers again. Several remembered seeing Sifo moving near that pallet shortly after midnight, though none claimed to witness violence. One man muttered he heard a thud followed by silence, but when pressed, he could not, or would not, clarify. Statements were contradictory, hesitant, as if fear sealed their throats. Each interview was transcribed, signed, and stored. At sunrise, Kruger walked to the edge of the wharf. There, against the rusted barrier rail, he found the luminol trail continuing faintly. A smear of blue dots led toward the lip of the pier, then vanished into water. He leaned over, flashlight sweeping the black surface. Nothing surfaced, but the implication settled cold. Something heavy may have been dragged. He wrote in his field log, "Blood trace stops at water's edge, possible body disposal route." The note was dated time-stamped 6:25 a.m. As he left, Kruger noticed another detail. The supervisor's clipboard carried rosters, but at the back, tucked between pages, was a slip of leather torn from binding. It matched the color of the ledger he had seen earlier. He picked it up, logged it under evidence 0023. The ledger was no longer rumor. It was scattering fragments across the scene like breadcrumbs. The evidence collected painted a picture of struggle, concealment, and disposal, but it remained incomplete. Without a body, without a witness, the case balanced on paperwork and chemical glow. The trail of blood ended where the sea began. Detective Kruger turned his attention to the supervisors who oversaw Bay 4. Chief among them was Piet Marais, a man in his 40s with 2 decades at the port. Marais managed rosters, signed manifests, and distributed overtime slips. His authority stretched quietly across the docks. Kruger requested access to Marais's office under warrant. The search was methodical. Filing cabinets were pulled, drawers cataloged, every sheet numbered and signed into the chain of custody log. Beneath layers of shift rosters, Kruger found a prepaid cell phone with its battery taped in. Alongside it lay another object that drew immediate attention, a ledger, thick with grease, its cover split along the spine. Inside, columns of numbers were written in alternating hands, one precise, one hurried. The entries listed sums far beyond dock salaries, figures in the tens of thousands, marked with abbreviations resembling container numbers. Each page was photographed under forensic light, tagged evidence 0026. Closer inspection revealed something sharper. Between 2 pages, Kruger found banknote bands, faintly inked with serial numbers. Cross-checking with the South African Reserve Bank database confirmed some of those notes had passed through a cash seizure 6 months earlier in Durban, an indicator of circulation through illicit channels. Kruger logged the bands, evidence 0027, and added a note. Possible proceeds of smuggling. The cell phone was analyzed for call detail records. It showed only 4 numbers dialed, each linked to unregistered SIMs. Timestamps clustered around midnight shifts. One call coincided exactly with the night Sifo disappeared. Cell site data placed the call near the harbor perimeter. The record was flagged as significant. Evidence 0028. During questioning, Murray remained calm. He denied owning the phone, claimed the ledger was an old payroll book. Yet his fingerprints were lifted from the ledger's cover, smudged in oil. The match was confirmed by the Forensic Lab's AFIS database, logged under case file reference. Kruger examined Murray's overtime sheets. He noted that Sifo's supposed extra shifts never appeared. But in the ledger, Sifo's name surfaced once, penciled faint beside the number 40987, the same container with the mismatched seal. The linkage was undeniable. Missing man, falsified seal, ledger entry. At the end of the search, Kruger sealed the ledger inside a brown evidence bag, marked with red tape, labeled Exhibit 47. It joined the growing pile of envelopes that now filled an entire drawer at the police property office. When he reviewed his notes that night, Kruger underlined one phrase 3 times: ledger as central object. Around it, he drew arrows pointing to receipts, overtime blanks, container seals, phone calls. The network began to map itself. Still, the body was absent, and the silence of witnesses deepened. Fear had turned words into fragments, hints into denials. On his desk lay the ledger, its cracked spine refusing to close. The leather cover bore Murray's fingerprints in oil and dust. The case widened when an anonymous call reached the tip line. The voice was male, distorted by distance, hurried. He said Sifo had uncovered a shipment hidden inside a fruit container bound for Europe. The caller claimed the shipment contained narcotics, concealed behind crates of oranges, loaded under the eyes of supervisors who had paid for silence. Sifo, he said, had threatened to report it. Within hours, he was gone. The line clicked dead before operators could trace it. Kruger logged the transcript. The call detail record showed origin from a prepaid SIM. Tower pinged near Maitland. The number never appeared again. Within 3 hours, it was deactivated. The absence itself became evidence, proof of a source silenced or erased. Kruger clipped the printout to his board, stringing red thread from tip line to container 40987. That night, Kruger authorized cell site analysis of phones seized from Murray and 2 other supervisors. The logs revealed a convergence. 3 devices clustered near Bay 4 at 11:47 p.m. on June 18th, the very window when CCTV failed. The analyst produced a triangular plot, each coordinate logged, each tower time-stamped. Kruger circled the overlapping sector in red, noting coincidence of presence. The ledger fragments resurfaced again. Flipping through Exhibit 47, Kruger noticed a penciled entry written in faint hand, Dock Night 75,000 S. The letter could have been a shorthand for Sifo or for shipment. Below it, a different handwriting inserted a crude arrow pointing to a date, June 18th. Kruger marked the page with a transparent sleeve, preventing smudge. Interviews continued, but fear grew sharper. One dock worker admitted Sifo had confided in him days before vanishing, saying he suspected supervisors were moving more than cargo. He asked his colleague what he should do. The man, now trembling in the interview chair, admitted he told Sifo to stay silent. He refused to sign the statement, staring at the floor. Kruger recorded the refusal, logged it as supplemental note. The detective began to map financial flows. With help from the Commercial Crimes Unit, he traced deposits linked to accounts held in false names. The ledger's numbers matched a series of cash deposits, each under reporting thresholds, spaced days apart. Patterns of structuring appeared. Kruger stapled the SWIFT reports into his file, each line a link in the chain. But the informant's disappearance cast a deeper shadow. The anonymous caller had risked contact, only to vanish. When Kruger sent officers to the location near Maitland, they found an empty flat, blinds drawn, utilities cut. No trace of occupancy remained. It was as if the caller had burned his trail. Kruger sat with his caseboard late that evening. In the center, the ledger page glared back at him. Pencil marks, half erased, lines slanting across margins. He traced the faint arrow to the date. He wrote in block letters beside it, "SIFO marked for removal." The number that called in the tip never connected again. By early July, Kruger's investigation moved beyond the docks. Analysis of ledger entries and customs records pointed to a secondary site, a warehouse listed under a shell company outside Cape Town, in an industrial strip near Epping. A warrant was secured. The raid unfolded at dawn, when light barely pierced the corrugated roofs. Inside, forklifts sat idle, pallets stacked with wooden crates stamped "Produce Export." The air was sweet with citrus, but beneath the scent, officers smelled chemicals. Dogs alerted to one stack near the rear. When the crates were pried open, oranges filled the top layer. Beneath them were bricks wrapped in plastic, powder white, vacuum sealed. Each brick was weighed, photographed, logged. The final tally exceeded 100 kilograms. Evidence was packed in seizure bags, sealed with chain of custody signatures. Kruger ordered a full inventory. The seized crates matched numbers scrawled in the ledger. On one page, "Dock Night" was followed by a sum and container code. That code aligned with the warehouse stack. The ledger was no longer circumstantial. It had become a map. Each column of numbers corresponded to shipments. Each shipment had its shell company, its crates, its bribes. In the far corner of the warehouse, hidden behind plastic wrap, officers found another ledger, smaller, pages stiff with dust. Its entries were shorter, marked with initials only. Some pages were water-stained, but others carried dates, sums, and what looked like dockworker badge numbers. SIFO's badge, 117, appeared twice. One entry marked it beside the number 75,000. Another had a cross beside it, dark pencil pressure tearing the paper. Kruger sealed the second ledger as Exhibit 59. He knew it would fracture defenses later in court, but for now, it stood as silent testimony that SIFO had stepped into a system larger than his shift, larger even than his supervisors. Photos from the raid showed lines of crates spread across the concrete floor, each one tagged with evidence markers. In the background, the small ledger lay open, spine broken. Kruger studied the handwriting, two hands again, one angular, one broad. The same alternating styles as in Moraes' ledger. He added it to the growing comparison chart at the lab. The seizure made headlines. Newspapers spoke of major bust, millions in narcotics. But inside the police office, Kruger remained measured. For him, the case was still about one missing dockworker, not drug totals. He wrote in his report, "Ledger indicates SIFO exposure. Possible motive confirmed." That night, he reviewed photographs of the crates. In one image, a single page of the new ledger was visible, corner curling upward. He zoomed the image until the grain showed. The entry 117 seemed etched deeper than any other number, graphite smudging outward like a bruise. In the silence of the evidence room, Kruger underlined the page reference. Ledger 2, page 14, SIFO marked. In a corner crate, another ledger waited, spine cracked. Detective Kruger moved to confront Piet Marais. The supervisor had been under surveillance since the warehouse raid, his movements logged in half-hour intervals. At dawn, officers collected him from his home in Belleville, seizing his phone, laptop, and notebooks. He was seated in the same port security room where dock workers had given their statements. Steel table, fluorescent lights, camera fixed above. The interview transcript began at 9:15 a.m. Kruger asked direct, "Where is SIFO Dlamini?" Marais shifted, hands clasped. He denied knowledge. Kruger slid Exhibit 47 across the table, the ledger bearing his fingerprints. Pages flipped. One entry circled. Dock Night, 75,000 town. S. Marais stared, but said nothing. Forensic handwriting analysis had already identified inconsistencies. 2 writing styles ran through the ledgers. The first, neat, slanting matched notes confirmed in Morace's handwriting samples. The second, broader, angular, belonged to an unidentified contributor. Kruger pressed him on this. Morace admitted he made notations, but insisted others use the book too. Under pressure, his composure broke. Morace admitted Sifo had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. He claimed the worker had stumbled onto a shipment, argued with handlers, and was taken off-site by unknown men. But his story fractured quickly. Asked about the night's timing, he gave 2 different accounts. Asked about the phone seized from his desk, he said it was left behind by someone else. Call records showed it active in his pocket at 11:47 p.m. Kruger recorded every inconsistency. Each denial became data. He logged subject evasive, timeline contradiction, denial versus call data. The interview ended at 12:40 p.m. Murray was held overnight. Back in the evidence office, Kruger placed ledger fragments side by side. 1 fragment from Sifo's locker, 1 from the pallet bloodstain, 1 from the supervisor's drawer. All showed the same recurring phrase, dock night. The lab reported graphite density consistent across samples, linking them as pages torn from the same source. The pages spoke more clearly than Murray's. The alternating handwriting revealed collaboration, one hand scheduling shipments, the other noting payoffs. At the bottom of one page, Kruger found a chilling detail. Sifo's name half-written, then struck through. A thick pencil mark gouged the paper. That mark became the turning point. In Kruger's report, he wrote, "Ledger indicates intentional removal, victim targeted." Though Murray now sat behind bars, the detective understood he was not the only author. The network extended outward. Numbers, initials, accounts, and containers. The unanswered question remained. Who else held the pencil? On the page, Sifo's name ended in a stroke of graphite. The sea returned what the ledgers only hinted. 10 days after Morace's arrest, a fisherman reported a body washed ashore near False Bay. Harbor police cordoned the site while forensic officers approached with cameras and gloves. The corpse was bound at the wrists with coarse rope, skin macerated by salt water, but clothing tags still intact. A wallet held fragments of ID blurred by seawater. Dental comparison confirmed the identity, Sifo Dlamini. The autopsy began at 10:03 a.m. under sterile lights. The pathologist noted blunt trauma on the skull, bruising along the ribs, water in the lungs. Toxicology confirmed drowning as final cause, but the injuries suggested restraint before immersion. Fibers lifted from the rope matched samples taken from harbor stock, industrial-grade hemp issued to Bay 4. Under magnification, salt crystals embedded in the strands aligned with dockside exposure. Each fiber was photographed, catalogued, sealed as evidence. 0062. Inside the jacket pocket, investigators discovered something unexpected. A fragment of paper, water-warped yet legible. Graphite lines bled but still visible. The same ledger format, columns of numbers, abbreviations, and at the bottom, a sum, 75,000. Kruger examined it in the evidence room, hands gloved, and realized it matched the earlier torn scrap from Sifo's locker. Same column spacing, same faint handwriting. Someone had stuffed the fragment into his pocket before disposal. Whether as marker or warning, it was impossible to say. Kruger added the autopsy report to his board. The photographs of rope, bruising, and ledger fragment were pinned side by side. For the first time, the absence was filled. The missing man now had a body, and the forensic anchors told a single story. Sifo had seen too much, argued, been silenced, then discarded into water. Family members were notified formally. A plain statement, time of identification, cause of death pending full toxicology. Their silence over the phone weighed heavier than any ledger line. Kruger closed his notebook with one final entry for the day. Sifo recovered. Ledger confirms motive. On the fragment, the last line blurred but readable. The penciled number 75,000 bled into saltwater stains. With the recovery of Sifo's body, The investigation pivoted fully to financial reconstruction. Kruger requested assistance from the Commercial Crimes Unit, pulling international wire data linked to the ledger entries. Each number in the book was matched against suspicious transaction reports filed with banks. The pattern emerged. Deposits, in sums just under regulatory thresholds, spread across accounts registered to shell companies. The money moved outward, first to Johannesburg, then wired through intermediaries in Mauritius, finally dispersing into accounts in Spain and the Netherlands. Each SWIFT transfer log was printed, certified, and sealed. Kruger taped the pages side by side across his caseboard. Red arrows stretched across maps pinned above, showing routes as if they were cargo lines on the sea. The path of money mirrored the path of the shipments. Customs seizures were re-examined. 6 months earlier, a container in Durban had been found carrying narcotics in false bottom crates. Serial numbers on the plastic bands from Moraes' office ledger matched notes logged in that seizure. The ledger again proved connective tissue between events that authorities had never linked. Kruger signed off on a forensic accounting affidavit. In it, he documented each cross-reference. Ledger entry to container code to customs manifest, manifest to wire transfer, transfer to account holder. He placed the affidavit into evidence, marked Exhibit 71. When prosecutors reviewed the material, they insisted the case was trial-ready. But Kruger was not finished. He knew systemic failure had allowed the ring to persist. He called for a search of a shipping container flagged in the most recent ledger page. Officers intercepted it at dockside, unsealed it under warrant. Inside, crates of textiles, false compartments lined with vacuum-sealed packages. Photographs were taken, evidence numbered sequentially, each crate marked in white chalk. The ledger had predicted it. A final page, almost torn away, listed textiles, 85,000 pounds, June. The match was exact. Kruger stored the ledger itself inside a clear plastic case, mounted on foam board. Labeled Exhibit 47, Central. Its spine cracked open whenever lifted, pages refusing to stay closed. As he wrote his nightly report, Kruger underlined one entry. Ledger ties SIFO to discovery. Direct motive for removal. The words were cold, final. On his desk, the ledger lay open to the page SIFO had touched. The torn page ended midline, sentence unfinished. The trial opened in Cape Town High Court under tight security. Defendants included Piet Marais and 3 associates pulled from the network of shell companies. Prosecutors wheeled in carts stacked with evidence boxes, ledgers, phone logs, DNA reports, financial transfers. The courtroom smelled of paper and dust, fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead. Exhibit 47, the ledger, was introduced on the first morning. Encased in clear plastic, its cracked spine visible, it was placed before the judge. Prosecutors displayed enlarged photographs of its pages on a screen. Rows of numbers, container codes, sums. Jurors saw the entry, dock night was 75,000 pounds, S, circled in red by investigators. Witnesses followed. Forensic experts testified on DNA traces found on the pallet, linking blood to SIFO. A pathologist described injuries, cause of death, and rope fibers identical to dock stock. A handwriting analyst presented charts comparing Moraes' samples to ledger entries, highlighting identical slants and pressure points. A telecom analyst traced burner phone calls aligning with the night of disappearance. Cell towers plotted onto maps, each element stacked like cargo on a manifest. The structure was undeniable. SIFO discovered a shipment, was silenced, disposed of. The ledger bound every loose thread. Defense argued the book was fabricated payroll, that phone data was circumstantial. Yet prosecutors showed fingerprint smudges lifted from its leather cover, matching Marais in oil and dust. They displayed receipts from SIFO's locker, cash far beyond his wages. They demonstrated the missing exit swipe from the gate logs, the corrupted CCTV frames that perfectly matched the critical window. Family members sat in the gallery, silent, their faces turned away from the evidence photographs. They listened as prosecutors read ledger fragments aloud, each number spoken like a tolling bell. On the 12th day, the jury delivered verdicts. Guilty of murder, smuggling, racketeering. Sentences ranged from 20 years to life. The judge closed the file with a single knock of the gavel. After court adjourned, Kruger walked past the evidence table. On top lay the ledger, its cover sealed in plastic, Exhibit 47 forever. He wrote in his own notebook, "Closure achieved, but not completion." Because inside the courtroom, one detail lingered. Half a page torn, entries missing. The ledger closed, but its torn edge still showed. The courtroom verdict ended the case in law, but not in memory. Detective Kruger remained with the files long after sentencing. He returned to the evidence vault, where the brown envelopes stacked in rows carried tags in red ink, gate logs, DNA swabs, autopsy photos, wire transfers. At the center, sealed in acrylic, sat Exhibit 47, the ledger. Its pages, stiff with grease and pencil dust, had carried the investigation from rumor to conviction. Kruger flipped through certified copies. He counted 12 complete pages, each aligning to shipments already traced. Then came the 13th, torn down the middle. Half a page gone, ripped jagged. The surviving fragment bore initials unfamiliar to any defendant on trial. Below the initials ran numbers larger than any prior sum. The implication was blunt. Other hands, other shipments, beyond the scope of the dock arrests. He prepared a memo marked, "For intelligence circulation only," logging the unredacted page as potential evidence of broader syndicate activity. The memo listed unknown initials, cross-border transfers, and a pattern of structuring designed to bypass detection. Yet bureaucracy stalled. The ledger page was filed under supplementary, sealed without follow-up. Kruger knew justice for SIFO was measured in a conviction, but the system had clipped its own sightline. The syndicate was larger than the names spoken in court, larger than the signatures on manifests. SIFO's death had illuminated a corner, not the whole room. At SIFO's funeral, family members lowered a coffin into Cape soil. A folded copy of his wage slip was placed inside, the final, ordinary artifact of his life. No one spoke of ledgers. Silence wrapped the ceremony. Back in the evidence vault, Kruger signed off the case file. He underlined his last entry. "Case closed, systemic threat persists." Then he placed the ledger back into its plastic case, locked it under number 47. The final page carried a name never read aloud.